Hey everybody, welcome back to Meet the Makers. We have Chris from Prints for Plants, both on the 3D printing side as well as being a houseplant enthusiast. So two things that are very near and dear to my heart and super excited to be talking to you today. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome, cool. To kick it off, how did you get into 3D printing in general? But I guess before that, did plants start first for you? Did printing start first? And how did those two end up mushing together?
So I've been collecting houseplants for probably almost a decade now. The upstairs of the house is it's we have plants everywhere, and
Yeah.
so I was the reason I got into 3D printing was I've always been interested in it, and then I found an Ender 3 Pro on some shady site for $200, and um, probably about 3 or 4 years ago. The first thing I printed was stuff for my plants. And then I started learning Fusion 360. That's when I designed my first houseplant trellis. I started making those, and then people were interested in them. So I was like, I'm just going to throw this up on Etsy. I started a Etsy shop, Prints for Plants, with one single trellis for a very long time. Now I have a small shop here. I have 6 printers currently. I just retired that Ender 3 Pro. I'm probably going to hang it from the rafters up here, retire it like a baseball number.
Yeah, it's maybe in a future project you could have a giant plant pot and use the under as a trellis of sorts in a project.
Brilliant.
It's cool to hear though that it sounds like your operation's grown from the early days of just having one listing online.
Yeah.
What printers are you running in the background right now for your operation?
So right now, the two newest printers are two A1 combos, and those have been great. That's why I retired the Ender 3 Pro finally. I have an Anycubic Cobra that's dedicated to PETG. It prints the anchors for my plant trellises all day long. And then I have a Mingda Magician Pro, which is an unusual one. It was my first large format printer. It's 400 by 400. And then I also have a Neptune Max, which is a fantastic printer, which is like 450 by 450 or something like that. I can print some larger scale trellises, and yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah.
It's using you have this dedicated printer for PETG. It
Yeah.
reminded me of something long before I had 3D printers myself. I had actually purchased a 3D printed pot on Etsy. I'm sure it said somewhere in the description not to leave it in the sun or not to leave it outside, but
Yeah.
it had been PLA and I hid it outside in Arizona of all places. And one day it just pulled apart into a million pieces and the plant fell everywhere. But for you, if I heard correctly, is it the base of your trellis that you're printing in
Yeah,
PETG?
I print the base in PETG. They're indoor. I mark them as indoor,
Yeah.
but some people still put them outside. Having the base in PETG is just a little bit more heat resistant, so they don't just fall over. Some
Yeah.
of the first ones I made were actually for my parents. They put them outside in Colorado with the intense sunlight, and they all wilted. That was sad.
I feel like you being a houseplant enthusiast yourself, and I always think this for like almost any product that you offer, but it's really helpful if you can use the product in your day to day and see
Yeah.
that like the process of what that product like wears and tears is over time. And yeah, houseplant stuff, it's definitely I think that's a place where it really probably comes in handy for that. Now, coming back to the beginning, so it sounds like you printed your initial trellis for yourself and then it branched out from there. Other people were interested. Was that kind of friends and family who were interested, or were you posting it somewhere and like strangers were interested? How did you like initially think to yourself, oh, this is a business opportunity?
Yeah, it was actually I where I worked. I actually had a lot of plants, and I started bringing them in there. And people, being the IT person there for
Yeah.
that place, I had a lot of people in my office, as you can imagine, and they were interested in them. So I started handing them out, and so that was really fun. And they started wanting to buy them for their family. So that's
Yeah.
kind of what got me interested in selling them. And then the other part was I was interested in adding more printers, and as everyone here knows, that gets expensive. I found a way to kind of fund that. So I've expanded the whole print shop based off sales from my Etsy shop.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. For you right now, is Etsy, is that your main sales channel? Do you do any other sales channels, or is everything on Etsy right now?
Everything's on Etsy right now. I actually just got the Prints for Plants domain like a week ago, finally.
Oh,
I
nice.
hope to have a Shopify eventually. And then we do some craft shows every year, which are surprisingly, they go great. I'll probably keep up that trend. My day job is pretty busy, so I don't have a lot of time to build or even maybe the knowledge to drive my own traffic. So Etsy's been really great for that.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. I way back in the day, I actually before any of this, I had a small houseplant shop where I sold houseplants myself, and
Oh, that's cool.
I had started out on Etsy actually, and that was one of the things I when I had moved to Shopify and I went that path as well. One of the biggest surprises to me was I was so used to Etsy driving my traffic, and
Uh-huh.
when I was responsible for driving my own traffic, I was like, wow, this is a whole other adventure of like business that I was like just a whole new thing for me.
Yeah, talk about a second job.
Yeah.
But I hope to get there, it would be pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's harder to get traffic over there when you don't have like algorithms that do views to your products. But ultimately, like in the long run, I do think for people who are just on Etsy or are just on TikTok Shop, like having your own mailing list and having your own customers on your own website, I do think it just adds a little more stability there. For me, it was an uphill battle in the beginning. I think it's long term. It's great to have that.
Yeah, definitely. And Etsy can do whatever they want, and you could disappear from there at any time just for no reason at all.
For sure. Now, you mentioned in there that you guys are doing some craft shows, markets, things like that
Mhm.
occasionally. When you guys go to shows like that, is it very obvious for people stopping by who are buying this? Do they know that it's 3D printed? Is that something you guys overtly show that they're 3D printed? Or do you think, are there people there who probably just think that they're trellises? Or how much of the 3D printing piece of it do you advertise to people?
That's great. Yeah. When we go to shows, like to show the product, I put that in plants. Like I bring plants, I put the trellises up, and people think that's cool. But then I definitely tell them that it's 3D printed, and that because they're all original designs that I do, so it's kind of part of my spiel. I said these are original, they're 3D printed. Most of them are 3D printed in a wood fill clay. Like I said, and I don't get quite that into it. I
Yeah.
say there's actual real wood in here, and people are like blown away because it's not a technology that they've seen. But usually when you go to those shows, it's, oh, this person has 50 dragons, and that's what they know 3D printing as. So it's cool to show a different aspect of maybe something they haven't seen before.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think like for somebody like you or me who we have 3D printers and we do it in the day to day, I always say after a while for us it loses a bit of that magic of it being
Hmm.
like this cool
Yeah.
thing. But I know for me when I had mentioned like I bought that first 3D printed pot before I had a 3D printer, that was like it wasn't necessarily like the most beautiful pot that I owned, but to me it was so cool that it was made with 3D printing. And I
Yeah.
think there's still a lot of people out there who like they don't have printers themselves, and this idea of something coming off of a 3D printer is really cool and really novel for them. So yeah, I could see that being cool at shows.
Yeah, the first 3D print I ever held was I had ordered it was a Pokemon Bulbasaur from someone local in town, and that was almost 10 years ago. And it was printed solid in ABS, and I just thought it was the
Mhm.
coolest thing. And it's sat on my desk at work ever since. But now when I look at it, I'm like, wow, the print quality is not very good.
Yeah,
But
right.
it's still magical. It's a piece of history almost.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I You won't be able to see it on your side, but maybe for people later they'll be able to see it. But I have a 3D printed rocket lamp over there, and same thing. It was another like thing I bought before my 3D printers, and I saw a bunch of people on the listing. They were like, the layer lines are so bad, and I had gotten, and I just thought it was
Yeah.
the coolest thing ever. But now I look back and I'm like, yeah, I guess this could be a little bit better quality, but no, it's a give and a take when you don't know about it.
Yeah, if I print on a trellis and maybe it's not exactly perfect, I'll usually take it to my wife Catherine and say, "How does this look?" And she's "It's beautiful." And I was like, "All
Yeah,
right," because again, yeah, I look harder at my stuff like everybody. I'm sure, kind of a magical for other
yeah.
people.
No, for sure. I think for us is whether you're a 3D printer, whether you're an artist or whatever it is that you do, I think everybody looks at their stuff with the most critical eye. And
Yeah, till
you
you
know,
hate it. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I There's been times where I printed stuff for friends and I've just toiled over it. I'm like, there's this. It looks terrible. I can't give this to them. And then sure enough, they get it and they're like, I love it. It's amazing. So yeah, I think we're always our own hardest critics and stuff like that.
yeah, definitely.
Now you mentioned that the trellises that you guys do, like they're original designs for you,
Mhm.
and it sounds like you're making them in Fusion 360.
Yeah. A lot of people use Fusion to make like rocket ships, and I'm here making plant trellises. Yeah, so that was the first real program I learned how to model in, and I was actually modeling practical things, which is really boring. And so I decided to make my first trellis in that since they're flat, and the first one wasn't super beautiful, but I've learned when you make a line, I do a lot of fine line work to match it to the nozzle you imagine printing it to. But yeah, so I use Fusion. I learned it from the desktop makes person who's on
Hmm.
there on YouTube, and it works for what I needed to do. I'm not a sculptor, so yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's funny you mentioned you're not making rockets in there, but your trellises they're still very beautiful. And I
Yeah,
mean,
thank
certainly
you.
I could not go
Thank
in
you.
there and I couldn't make something like that. For you, how long did it take you from no skill infusion to like being able to get to being able to make your own trellises and things like that?
The it actually it after I just took the online Udemy course for that, and I was able to make the trellises pretty quick. But if you look at the first couple of that I've made that don't exist anymore, I'm not going to show you. They were very like blocky and
Okay,
very
yeah.
like angular, and so after about a year of designing just on my own, I figured out design this, print this, look at it, and print it again until I could get those kind of lines I was looking for. So I'm still, whenever I design something, I still have to print it, and I'll always find something that needs to be adjusted on structurally because I can't really see it until I'm holding it.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm at a disadvantage there, but that's the beauty of now I have these A1s that can print a trellis in 30, 45 minutes when the ender was like 6 hours. So it's a lot faster now. But
Yeah,
yeah, I
I
hope that answered your question.
yeah, no, it definitely. I always think like I don't sell 3D prints myself, but the when bamboo came out of the market, I think just from a prototyping standpoint, it really must have changed the game for a lot of people because like you said, going from 6 hours to hold something in your hand to 30 minutes really speeds up that whole workflow there. For you, like when you're making a new trellis, maybe at this point in the game, you're just good and you can get it on the first shot, but in the beginning, was there a lot of iterations of trellises, and how often do you have to go back to the drawing board after you have that first print laid down?
Yeah, so the first trellis I printed, I had this brilliant idea that didn't turn out so brilliant that I'd put a mirror in it,
Oh,
and it probably took 4 or 5 tries before the mirror actually fit, and it was measuring, and then the ender wasn't super accurate.
yeah,
It's still, I'd say, every new trellis I make now, I still print it probably twice before I'm happy with it, and then before we like mass produce them.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because
No,
there's always,
make
I don't know if you can see this one here.
yeah,
So this is a new one I had. I'm starting in multicolor trellises, but like I had to adjust like this piece here has to touch here so the structure is good
mm,
here. And then when I first printed the fox here, the leaves didn't touch and it was all wobbly. So those are the kinds of things I can't really see on the drawing board as well. So yeah.
yeah, yeah. I know even for me, I also don't 3D model either, but even sometimes prints that I see online, I'll go to make them, and then actually like having them in your hand, and oh, this is a little different than I was expecting. So
Yeah.
yeah, I can see that for sure. For you, since you guys have original designs, you're making all of your own trellises. How is that kind of something where you sit down and you say, I think that this is cool? Do you have people approaching you and say, this is what I'm looking for? What is that design process like, and how much of that is just like your own mind and how much is driven by your customers?
So I have a list that I keep of just if I get an idea, I put it
Yeah.
on the Google Drive list. My customers will often suggest designs. I think that's the bulk of it. It's a lot of it's just like this is my escape from the normal work, so I want
Yeah.
to make this art. That's how it goes there. But I do like to listen to what people are asking for because usually I can deliver on that. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think I'm not a IT guy myself, but I work at a software company, and I think you sometimes you just need that like art escape or
yeah.
that hobby escape sometimes outside of your day-to-day job. So yeah, no, that's very relatable for sure.
That's neat. I never imagined sending. I've with Etsy, you can send your art all over the world. People buy
Yeah.
it, and that's pretty neat.
What's like the craziest I don't know if you keep track of like where you've sent stuff, but do you have anywhere like super crazy you've sent your trellises?
Not crazy. They've gone to Australia, England, Switzerland, Sweden. Those are the ones I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah.
So I sell
Yeah.
a surprising a lot to Canada,
Oh,
even though it
interesting.
doubles the price of the trellis and shipping. But yeah, it's fascinating.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
I'm always curious, and particularly for you being on the houseplant side, again, a little different, but when I was selling houseplants, there was a ton of customer service that came up for it just by nature, selling a live plant through the mail. It's a lot happens with that. But for you, do you have any crazy customer service stories or anything that's been like a struggle from a customer service standpoint in your business, or has it been pretty smooth?
I only have a couple 1-star reviews on that, and it was mostly just people being very unreasonable. So I had a person that bought one, and it got lost in the mail, and she was very
Mhm.
angry. And I was like, no problem, I'll just send you another one. So I sent her another one, and then she said, "Oh no, I just got it." And she said, "But she like you with your pot, she put it out in it was I don't know if it was Arizona, but somewhere very warm. It was like 110, and it warped it right away." And
Yeah.
she was very mad about it, and I just said, "I already sent you a replacement and 1 star." And I was just I felt like there was nothing else I could have done for that person.
Yeah. I feel there's sometimes you just get those people that there's nothing you could do. It was just
Yeah,
going to be a 1 star. But honestly, I feel like when I look at reviews on businesses, I'm like skeptical of the people who it's all 5 star reviews. I feel
yeah,
if
that's
you've
a good
ever
point.
sold something, you're gonna get a 1 star review no
Yeah.
matter how good you do it. So yeah, I think I almost when I see what a couple 1 star reviews, I'm like that checks out. That makes sense.
Yeah, a friend of mine's like a senior marketing person, and he actually I went to him and I was like, "What should I do with this?" And he's here. You just need to go onto the review and respond to it in like a normal manner,
Yeah.
show that you did everything you can. And he says that has a lot of value for folks like you. Don't trust the people that don't
Yeah.
have, all 5 star reviews. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
no, I think that's a good strategy for sure. For you, similar but different though, in terms of like craziness in a business, selling 3D prints, especially back in the days when you were under, like you said, it's not something where you can just pump out a ton of them all at once. Have you ever run into inventory issues from a 3D printing standpoint?
Yes. So the I think it was my probably my first Mother's Day. So my biggest time of the year for whatever reason is Mother's Day. It's bigger than
Hmm.
Christmas. Yeah. And it's usually gifts to moms. And it was back when I only had the one printer. And I got so far behind that year that that's when I went and got the Cobra. I was I caught up to it. It was like you were saying about customer service. It was like a lot of apologizing, a lot of
Yeah.
yeah, I can't get this there before Mother's Day. I know that's fine. And for the most part, and during that time, folks were very kind about it. That's one of the reasons why I have so many printers now. It's great, especially like you said with the bamboos, that I can print a trellis in an hour, so I don't have to keep as much stock, and yeah, it's so much better now.
Yeah, I think having that quick turnaround time, it just gives a lot of breathing room across the board. Funny enough, talking to people throughout the different people who sell stuff, and it seems to be a common trend that like a lot of people they just hit whether it's Mother's Day or Christmas or whatever it is, like that 1 week where it a lot of people end up going out and buying additional printers just to
Yeah.
keep up the capacity. So it seems like that's common.
I'm really happy about the era of super fast printing. Let's put it that way. I'm sure everybody is, but from a pumping things out perspective, it's been such a godsend.
Yeah, no, I could definitely imagine. Just as a hobbyist, it's a godsend. So I
Yeah,
have to imagine as a business,
yeah.
it's probably very helpful. For you, just like thinking about your business in general, how you run it from a design standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, all these different pieces. Anything critical you think you've learned along the way that you would pass on to maybe somebody looking to get into a similar style of business?
Absolutely. So, like costs are, I've changed how I think about costs. So, since I use this to make art, like infusion, like that's not a part of the process that I cost at all. Like the design time that I spend, I just do that to relax. When I first started, I was like, oh, it took me this many hours, and I'm only so I threw that out the window, and it's been a lot less stressful since.
Mhm.
So then what I do is just I do materials plus 50% on markup for anything I sell, and then I try and keep track throughout the year of costs and that sort of thing. So I'd recommend that to anyone that, especially when you're getting started, maybe don't stress about the design time if you're doing original stuff.
Yeah, I think I can at least say for experience for me in starting small businesses, it's definitely important to know your numbers and it's definitely important to keep track of things. But I think a lot of times too, especially if it's your first business venture, it's the numbers aren't always going to make sense when you factor your time
Oh
into
yeah,
it.
yeah,
So I agree. I think separating yourself from that, not forever, but like in the beginning, I think that can be really helpful.
absolutely. Yeah, if I was gonna do this like full time, I'd probably again have to adjust. But I think the only other thing I'd say is, since I sell on Etsy, it's really important to understand the fees there because it's like they don't lump them all together in one piece. There's a lot of good free trackers out there that you can put your price in and it'll tell you like all the current fees on Etsy, and then you can know if you're gonna make money at it. Um,
Yeah. That's with Etsy. I know I likewise I experienced that. I know a lot of people they get scared away from all the fees, which you do have to keep track of it. It's not
Hmm.
super obvious when you're making your listing all
Hmm.
the places that the fees are going to come into play, but again, I do think it's great, especially if it's your first time dipping your toes into selling stuff online. It's going to help you get traffic. It's there's just like that backbone of infrastructure there for you to not have to figure everything else out on your own. So I know a lot of people get discouraged by the fees and get scared away by the fees, but I think everybody has to make their own decision. But I do think it's a good platform to start on for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been great. So, especially like I said, it's not my full-time gig, so it's if I don't make, I'm not going to worry about making rent this month.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about your business up until this point. We've
Yeah.
talked about your 3D printing side, but I am just curious because you're a plant enthusiast yourself too, to know more about you on the plant side. What do you have a favorite plant? What types of plants do you tend to keep? And tell me just a little bit more about what you got going on over on that side of things.
Yeah, sure. Like I said, I've been collecting plants for a long time, and half of my collection is probably like orchids.
Hmm.
So I have what you'd call species orchids from all over the world, which is pretty cool. My smallest orchid's probably about this big, which is really neat. And then for one of the first things I started doing with the trellises was Hoyas. So I have a lot of
Hmm.
Hoya plants. If folks don't know, they're Hoyas come in all different leaf shapes and sizes, and they have some of the most beautiful blooms next to orchids, in my opinion. And trellising them up is a way to keep them healthy and keep them growing really well. I have quite a few Hoyas as well. I have a very forgiving spouse, so I have our entire guest room upstairs is probably filled with multiple plant shelves, and
Oh,
that's
nice.
definitely a different tour than this.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are some of my favorite ones, and then I keep plants throughout the house at a more reasonable level. So
It's cool to hear. I always love hearing people's different interests for plants. For you,
yeah.
what you keep, it's I always think when I think of orchids and Hoyas, it's a plant that I think it requires somebody who's very patient. They only bloom it's not very frequently that they bloom, but when they do bloom, they're so beautiful. And I think a lot of people have a misconception too with orchids. They're so common. You see them at grocery stores and you see them here
Hmm.
and there, and the flowers fall off. And I think a lot of people think that you just like, throw them away after that, which makes me so sad. But
Yes,
yeah,
it's
you seem to be more on the flower side of things. Am I wrong for saying that?
no, the solution is you just buy more. So then you have so many that something's always in bloom. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I ironically the ones that I have from the grocery store are the only ones that bloom on time every single year for me. So some of them I've been waiting for years, which is crazy to say, but eventually they do bloom, and it's pretty cool. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, it's funny you say that about having so many that there's always something going on. That was how I think I originally got so deep into houseplants. I started out with just a couple and
Uh-huh.
one was getting a new leaf at the time and I was so excited about it. But
Yes.
then you have to wait so long for another leaf to come out and I was like, well, if I just get more, there'll
Yeah.
always be something that has a new leaf coming. So, yeah, it's very relatable.
Yeah, yeah. No, I it's fun. It's again like totally different than work, so it's nice to have a hobby that's I guess more organic, literally.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
I guess like a final question that kind of melds these two together. It sounds like that you're putting stuff in PLA and you mentioned things being like more of a literal organic hobby, but it's a bioplastic. And in theory, I believe you have to like commercially compost it, but
You do.
it's more of a bioplastic than other plastics that we see in the day to day. Is that something when you're offering trellises, is that like an interest point to people or does that come up in conversation or is that kind of for non 3D printers, does that kind of go over people's heads a little bit?
So I do list it as a bioplastic on my listings for Etsy. In real life, I don't honestly I don't really believe in calling it like a compostable
Yeah,
plastic. I think we've all seen the videos where it's been buried outside for 10 years and it looks the same.
right.
So I try not to, most sellers do lean heavily into that. What I talk about is so I save, you probably can't see it back there, but I save all my plastic, all the remnants, and I melt it down into small succulent planters,
Oh, nice.
and I sell those at my craft fairs. And that's just people love to hear about how we're recycling the plastic and like upcycled. So that's I approach from that angle. We don't throw any plastic away, maybe a small amount, but it's all going to eventually be made into molds and other practical things like that. Yeah, and then if you're saving that waste, it's in selling it, you're recouping some of the loss there.
Yeah, for sure. I love melting down my
I think they're
scraps and my
pretty.
supports and all that stuff. And Yeah, I have one. I had this like big pot mold that I got. It's actually one of my favorite pots that I have. I do need to
That's
drill like a
cool.
drainage hole in the bottom, but
Yeah.
they're very cool. And yeah, I think that especially from presenting it to other people, I feel like that's a really cool way to discuss how everything, it's not just like plastic going into the trash. That's very
Yeah,
cool.
fun too to see how they turn out after you've been melted down. For the record, I use a sacrificial garage sale toaster oven outside. I don't do it inside because, yeah, it gets a little strong scented there. But yeah,
I used to do my inside in my like actual cookware, and yeah,
uh-huh.
after a couple rounds of that, I likewise I
Yeah,
ran down to Goodwill and I got myself my dedicated filament melting oven
yep.
that goes outside. But yeah,
Hmm.
no, it can get a little crazy for sure.
Yeah. So we've recycled about 7 pounds of plastic so far.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's awesome. That's
it's
very
fun.
cool. Chris, it was so interesting learning about you, learning about your plants, your printers, and your whole operation over there. For people who don't follow you online already and would like to, or they want to buy, where can they find you online?
Just Prints for Plants on Etsy and on all the socials, Instagram, TikTok, that sort of thing. So you can find me there.
Awesome. Appreciate you coming on today. It was so much fun learning about all of the stuff that you have going on there. And with that said, that has been Meet the Makers.
Well, thank